Welcome, everyone. Tonight, I've got a story that will chill you to your bones. Hush now, are you ready? Well, let's find out, shall we?
I used to work at this old hotel in the city. It wasn't anything fancy, just a place for travelers to rest their heads. The building itself was ancient, probably built in the early 1900s, with creaky floors and dim lighting that never quite chased away the shadows. Most of the time, it was just a regular job. But there was one room, room 214, that nobody ever stayed in. The staff avoided it like the plague, and guests were never booked there. It had a reputation, you see, a dark one. One night, the manager, Mr. Jenkins, called me into his office. He looked uneasy, which was unlike him. He was always the calm, collected type. "Dave," he said, "I need you to clean room 214. We've got an inspection tomorrow, and it needs to be spotless." I felt a chill run down my spine. But why me? Can't someone else do it? He shook his head. "Everyone else is busy. Besides, you're the best we've got." I wanted to argue, but his tone made it clear there was no room for discussion. So, armed with my cleaning supplies, I made my way to the second floor, my heart pounding harder with each step. The hallway leading to room 214 was darker than the rest of the hotel, the lights flickering as if struggling to stay on. I reached the door, took a deep breath, and unlocked it. The room looked normal at first glance, just an ordinary hotel room. But the air felt heavy, like something was pressing down on me. I started with the bathroom, scrubbing the sink and toilet, trying to keep my mind off the room's eerie reputation. As I moved to the bedroom, I noticed something strange. The mirror above the dresser was cracked, with a single shard missing. It seemed odd, but I shrugged it off and kept cleaning. That's when I heard it, a whisper, so faint I thought I was imagining it.
"Help me."
I froze, my heart racing. "Hello? Is someone there?" No response. I shook my head, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. I turned back to my work, but the whispering continued, growing louder and more desperate. I spun around, searching for the source, but the room was empty.
"Help me, please."
The voice was coming from the mirror. I stepped closer, my reflection staring back at me with wide, terrified eyes. The crack in the mirror seemed to pulse, as if it was alive. Suddenly, I was no longer looking at my reflection. Instead, I saw a woman, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow. She was mouthing the words, "Help me." I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The image vanished, and I was left staring at my own horrified face. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. I forced myself to finish cleaning, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the rag. As I made my way to the door, I heard a noise behind me, a low, guttural growl. I turned slowly, my heart in my throat. The bed was shaking, the covers rising and falling as if something was thrashing beneath them. I backed away, my mind screaming at me to leave. But the door wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The growling grew louder, more aggressive. I watched in horror as the covers were flung aside, revealing a figure underneath. It was the woman from the mirror, her face twisted in agony. She reached out to me, her fingers like claws.
"Help me."
I couldn't move, couldn't speak. She dragged herself off the bed, her body contorting in unnatural ways. I backed into the corner, my eyes wide with terror. She crawled towards me, her movements jerky and unnatural.
"Help me, please."
I pressed myself against the wall, tears streaming down my face. "What do you want?" She stopped inches from me, her eyes boring into mine.
"Save me before it's too late."
With a final, heart-wrenching scream, she disappeared, leaving me alone in the room. The growling stopped, and the air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I scrambled to my feet, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the door. It opened easily this time, and I bolted down the hall, not stopping until I was outside, gasping for breath. I never told anyone what happened that night. Who would believe me? But I did some digging, and what I found out chilled me to the bone. Years ago, a woman named Margaret had checked into room 214 with her young son. She was running from an abusive husband, desperate to start a new life. But he found her. In a fit of rage, he murdered her and their son before taking his own life. Their bodies were found in that room, and ever since, strange things have been happening. I couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret's spirit was still trapped in that room, tormented by her tragic past. And now, she had reached out to me for help. A few nights later, I decided to go back. I couldn't ignore her plea for help. Armed with a flashlight and a determination I didn't know I had, I made my way to room 214. The door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, the air heavy with anticipation. "Margaret," I called out softly, "I'm here to help you." The room was silent, but I felt a presence, a cold, oppressive energy that sent chills down my spine. I approached the mirror, my reflection distorted and eerie in the cracked glass. "Margaret, show yourself," I whispered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the crack in the mirror widened, and she appeared. Her eyes filled with sorrow and desperation. "Help me," she said again, her voice barely a whisper. I nodded, my throat tight. "I will. I promise." I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew I had to find a way to free her spirit. I spent the next few days researching everything I could about the paranormal, talking to experts and reading countless books. I learned about cleansing rituals and ways to help trapped spirits move on. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the hotel one final time. I performed the ritual, my heart pounding with fear and hope. As I finished, I felt a sudden warmth, a lightness in the air. Margaret appeared before me, her expression one of gratitude and peace.
Thank you.
She whispered before fading away, the room finally feeling free of its dark energy. I left the hotel that night, knowing I had done something important. Margaret and her son were finally at peace. But I also knew I could never forget what I had experienced. Room 214 might be cleansed, but the memory of that night would haunt me forever.
So, remember this story next time you check into an old hotel. You never know what kind of history those walls might hold. And if you ever hear a whisper in the darkness, don't ignore it. Someone might be reaching out to you for help, just like Margaret did for him.